In this tutorial, we'll be going over texture application and complex shapes in Hammer. Make sure you already have a basic understanding of brushes for this tutorial. You can get a basic understanding of them in the first video in this series. First off, my 162 genius IQ forgot to say how to rotate things in Hammer in previous videos. To rotate a brush or entity, select it and then click on it again in the 2D view to make it rotate. Drag the empty circles at the corners to rotate it. When you're happy, click on it again to get to the shear tool, which I'll pass over for now, and click on it a third time to get back to transforming it and changing its dimensions. When you first make a brush, each of its faces will already have the currently selected texture applied to each face. To change the texture on a brush, select the desired texture, select the brush you want to texture with that texture, and click on the Apply Current Texture tool. It's the one that looks like a red brick cube. To change an individual face's texture, use the Texture Application tool, the multicolored brick cube, and right-click on the face that you want to texture with it. Click on a face to select it individually, and hold down Control to select multiple faces at once. When you select a face with the Texture Application tool, it automatically also selects the texture, scale of the texture, and alignment of the texture of the face you select. A texture's scale affects how big the texture looks on the brush. It's really hard to explain this with words, but a bigger texture scale will make the texture look more zoomed in on a brush. Texture alignment is how the texture is shifted around on a brush. This is also really hard to explain with words, so instead I'll just show you what happens when I change the alignment of a texture. You can change a texture's scale on a face with the Texture Scale options in the Texture Application tool. Most textures are by default at 0.25 or 1/4 scale, and they're usually best left off like that, unless you really need a texture to fit a face perfectly. You can have Hammer automatically scale the texture to fit the face by selecting the face and then hitting Fit. You can adjust the texture's alignment to align with the face's center, left, right, bottom, or top by clicking on their respective buttons. You can also manually adjust the texture's alignment here under Texture Shift. Keep in mind that if you have two faces with the same texture right next to each other, but they have different texture alignments or scales, then there will be noticeable and ugly seams, so try to be consistent with scales and alignment. If you have a prism with a bunch of sides, and you want the texture to wrap around it kinda seamlessly, then hold Alt as you apply the texture to the next face, then select the newly textured face, and then repeat until the entire prism is all textured, like so. If a face is not going to be seen by the people playing the map, then they should have the texture Tools/Tools No Draw. By doing this, Hammer does not have to calculate the lighting for faces that will never be seen. This can cut down on compile times a lot. For this reason, it's good to stick with only the dev textures in earlier stages of mapping. These are the gray and orange placeholders, and you can apply the textures you want to the visible faces of brushes, and then use the Replace tool to replace the dev ones with a no draw. To find and replace textures, open the Texture Application tool, select the texture you want to replace, and then hit Replace. Browse for the texture you want to replace them with, and hit OK. In older versions of Hammer, if you just want to select all faces of a certain texture, then check the box that says Do Not Replace Textures. In newer versions of Hammer, you can just hit Mark instead of Replace. While math making, you may have noticed a drop-down menu up here on the right that lets you make different shapes such as spheres, arches, and prisms. To make any of these shapes, just select them from the menu, change the number of sides to something you want, where it's applicable of course, drag out a square in one of the 3D views, and then just hit Enter. If you're making an arch, this dialog will appear. Wall width controls how thick the arch pieces are. I'd keep it at 16 for now. Number of sides is self-explanatory. I'd keep it under 20 for most shapes, unless you're making a big, massive arch. Arc controls how many degrees the arch is. 180 is a semicircle, while 360 is a full circle. This basically makes it a hollow cylinder if you use 360. Start angle and add height are best left alone for now. Click on the preview to get a preview of your arch, and hit OK when you're ready to make it. When it's first made, the arch is on its side. Rotate it in the 2D views until it's either upright or in the position you want it to be in. At this point, make it a func detail by pressing Ctrl+T with it selected. If you want the arch to be like a neat tunnel going through a cube, like this, then select the Vertex manipulation tool down at the bottom of the tools. Using it, click on an individual segment, and drag its outer vertices, the white squares, to fit to the grid just like so. You should now have a nice arched tunnel that you can incorporate into your level. To add height but not stretch out the arch, just shrink the grid and make brushes like so. I've almost never used any shapes beyond blocks, arches, and cylinders, so I won't be covering them, and they're mostly self-explanatory. The Vertex manipulation tool is incredibly powerful, but also incredibly dangerous. It lets you make all sorts of complex shapes. To use it, select it down on the left, and then click on the brush you want to morph. Drag its vertices in the 2D views. You can select them in either the 2D or 3D views. To select multiple at once, hold down Ctrl as you click on each of them. You can add more vertices to drag around by selecting a yellow square and then hitting Ctrl F. Be careful when using the Vertex manipulation tool not to make any concave shapes. What I mean by this is if you make a shape in Hammer, and you can draw a line from one vertex to the other that goes outside of the shape, then Hammer will not compile it properly, and your map will just be ruined. If you need to make a concave shape, then go ahead and make one in Hammer, but then use the Clip tool to break it into two convex shapes. Select the Clip tool at the left, and then click on the brush you want to clip. Drag the white squares until the line between them splits the brush in the way you want. The side of the brush that is red will be deleted, but you can change what side it is with Shift X. To keep both sides, hit Shift X until both sides are white. Hit Enter to make the cut. You may have seen under the Tools menu a tool called Carve. Never ever 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 use the Carve tool. Please, I beg you. The Carve tool is used to make holes in brushes, but it cuts the brushes in unintuitive and wacky ways, and carving a complex shape will cause the shape to deform, stretch, its vertices go all over the place, and a host of other things. It can also create micro brushes, which are brushes that are too small for Hammer to handle, and it'll stop the map from compiling. I repeat, never use the Carve tool! Never! Instead of using the Carve tool, use the Clip tool to cut holes into brushes like so. Remember to make all the complex shapes into func details unless they're sealing the map up from the void. If you don't, it'll take a really long time to compile your map, and it won't perform as well. Thanks for watching. You should now have a basic understanding of how to make complex shapes in Hammer, as well as how to manipulate textures a bit. Again, thanks for watching, and if you have any suggestions on how I can improve these tutorials, please tell me in the comments. Keep safe and have a good day.